Matthew, the 27th chapter, beginning with the 50th verse. I am reading from the NIV. I'll pause as they put it up on the screen. And even while we know the screen will be there on Sunday morning, still bring your Bibles. At least have it on your phone. Get a phone app. Amen. And you never know when the technology is going to fail. And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks split. I want to end with the 51st verse. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks split. Scripture as it is written. May the Lord add a blessing to the reading here of his most holy word. You may be seated in the presence of the Lord and each other. Take someone by the hand and say to them, friend, Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Now, do you know what to do in earth-shaking times? Turn to somebody else and say to them, neighbor, Happy New Year to you too. Now, do you know what to do in earth-shaking times? Amen. I want to take just a few moments, and I literally mean that, just a few moments, what to do in earth-shaking times. I think it's fair to say 2016 was an earth-shaking year. In many ways, when we consider just the iconic personalities that left us. Perhaps the most well-known sports figure in the history of the planet, Muhammad Ali, who is beloved more for what he did outside the ring, even than what he did inside the ring. A man who transcended his sport by being willing to give up all the fame and money that came with being the heavyweight champion of the world when it was the most illustrious and celebrated sports achievement in the world in the prime of his life for sake of conscience. How rare is that today in today's culture of excessively greedy but socially empty and hollow athletes who find it difficult just to stay away from the law in the off season. We think about people like Prince, who gave many of us reason to grab our cell phones and sway from side to side as we sang Purple Rain. And then even as the Grim Reaper seemed to move with a vengeance in this past week, and Debbie Reynolds, the movie star, the triple threat of song, dance, and acting, and her daughter, who played Queen Lao in Star Wars, left within 24 hours of this world. It was an earth-shaking year. It was an earth-shaking year in terms of the natural disasters that hit this world, and the floods and the famines that sent millions upon millions homeless and hungry and destitute, waiting on governments to free up resources to come to their aid and relieve their suffering. It was an earth-shaking year, and a continual political tragedy which has turned into a humanity tragedy in Syria, Aleppo, the epicenter, where a totalitarian king, a man who will rule at all costs, even if he has nothing left to rule over but a desert, aided and abetted by Putin, the president and neo-czar of Russia, Trump's boyfriend. Strange bromance, as we now have a new axis of evil between Trump and Putin and Benjamin the Butcher Netanyahu, which was his name in the 70s when he and his extreme right Knesset party bulldozed the homes of Palestinians and replaced them with Jewish settlements that the whole world has declared as oppressive, with the exception of the United States, who finally this past week got a little bit of conscience and common sense. It's been an earth-shaking year. It's been an earth-shaking year politically, and things that we didn't see coming. We didn't see how white nationalism would sweep through England, which portends itself to be a conscientious country, but Brexit caught us all by surprise. The leader, the linchpin of the European Union, flew the coop, and now threatens to unravel the thread of NATO, the shield that was put in place following World War II, when 300 million people globally lost their lives. Over 50 million in Europe alone. Not a single European family went untouched by that colossal contest for hemispheric superiority, and that NATO shield to stop the Russian bear from ever rampaging through that continent again. And now the neo-czar Putin wants to tear down the shield so that he can try and resurrect the old Soviet bloc. A man who is on our president-elect's most admired men's list. And then American Brexit that happened on November the 11th, when supposedly they said that Hillary's firewall collapsed and America went into the twilight zone as a carnival barker, and a reality TV show host is emerging to be tethered with the powers of the presidency of the United States of America. Imagine that, the most powerful man in the world, and yet is the least informed man in the world, knows nothing about foreign policy, nothing about domestic policy, and we know nothing about him. We don't know what's on his tax returns, and we don't know where his wife's immigration papers are. We know nothing, he knows nothing, we know nothing about him, and that's okay with enough Americans even to win the Electoral College. It's been an earth-shaking year, and that doesn't even include what happened in your house, in my house. In these little towns, in these little places, with the things that are soaring and coursing through our bodies right now, with emotions that are too powerful even to be put into words. It's been an earth-shaking year for those who lost loved ones, for those whose relational status is up in question, for those who's got a spot on their x-ray, for those whose child went to jail, for those who's sitting here right now and there's a loved one whose whereabouts are unknown. It's been an earth-shaking year. And the gospel story around Jesus Christ is that when he laid his head into the locks of his shoulders and gave up his spirit, Sam, the ground began to shake. Matthew records a cosmological crisis, because there's always been a connection between the natural and the spiritual. For every spiritual truth, there's a natural corollary. For every natural law, there's a spiritual corollary. And sometimes nature has to let humanity know that if nobody else, it knows who the Lord is. Jesus said once in Palm Sunday, he says, if they don't cry out, the rocks will cry out. We found out that when the Lord of glory, when the one of whom John spoke of, when he said all that was made by him, and without him was nothing made that was made. And when the maker of heaven and earth, the one who stepped out of nothing and said, let there be, an ex nihilo, created everything there was out of nothing before there was a when and a where. When he died, that the sun refused to shine. It became like nighttime at midday. And they said the moon ran red with blood. It said the graves around Jerusalem holding the faithful, that they got up from their dead in a prelude to resurrection glory, in protest as the Lord of glory died. And the ground began to shake. It was an earth-shaking moment. Physically, it was an earth-shaking, but it only underscored it, what had happened on the cross. Soteriologically, that means in matters of salvation, the fate of our eternal souls, it was an earth-shaking moment. Beyond what they even knew in that moment, it was an earth-shaking moment. And by definition, an earth-shaking moment is when there are powers at play that are beyond your control. And when things are displaced and never put back in the order they were before. That's an earth-shaking moment. On April the 29th, 1965 at 8:29 in the morning, the fourth strongest recorded earthquake in Washington state history occurred when a 6.5 Richter scale earthquake whose epicenter was in Des Moines but could be felt over 190,000 square miles. Thank God for Wikipedia. Could be felt in Oregon and Idaho and British Columbia. And it went on for 45 seconds, which is an eternally long period of time for an earthquake. The great earthquake in Los Angeles tore down most of the highways that they thought were earthquake proof. Took only 18 seconds. 45 seconds that earthquake went on. 3 people died here in Seattle from falling debris. What was significant about it personally is that it's my earliest memory in life. I was 3 months and 3 days short of my 4th birthday. I was still 3 years of age. Some of you say, I didn't think he was born till the 90s. I know, I get that all the time. I know. Stay with me. I know that's earth shaking for you. It's all right. 8:29. It was a traumatic moment because my mother was getting ready to send my brother Norman, who was 5, off to school. Or actually, it just turned 6. And it was just Norman, Felicia, and I at the time. April and Heather would come later. And when the ground started shaking, she grabbed us up and we went back. We were living on 14th Street off of K Street in Tacoma before it became MLK. And she jumped us, put us on the bed, and we just rode it out. Just roll it out. Now they say when there's an earthquake, you should get under a doorway or so. But sometimes when earth-shaking moments, you don't think, you don't plan it. You just go in your intuitive response, and we just got still and we just rode it out. That's my earliest memory in life, was an earth-shaking moment. You tend not to forget earth-shaking moments. Well, in 2001, when we had the 3rd strongest earthquake recorded since 1850. I was sitting in my office, 1634 19th Avenue, still pastor of Mount Zion Baptist Church, in a meeting with Kenny Joe McMullen. He was trying to get me to become more of an advocate for POCAN, People of Color Against AIDS Network. And in the middle of our conversation, the walls started buckling, and books started flying off my shelf, and my desk started moving. 3 or 4 of us together couldn't move that old desk, but it started moving on its own. And I looked at Kenny Joe looked at me. We didn't say anything, but we both we knew what was going on. We were in an earthquake. Now, we both defied the instructions we were given as children of the Cold War era, to where if you hear any sirens go into a bomb shelter or get under a desk or table, we just kind of sat there, 2 scared Negroes just sitting there. That wasn't what we were taught. You know, sometimes that just seemed. I ain't changed. And I looked at him, and we just kind of just still and rode it out. And my brothers and my sisters, perhaps, and if you latch your mind onto any of this, the first thing you do, Sam, when you're in an earth-shaking moment, is sometimes you just need to be still and ride it out. Not mean still forever, but to everything there's a season. In that moment, in life, at times when we are dealing with forces beyond our control. See, the first thing an earth-shaking moment will impress upon you is that you're not in control. And that's hard for us because the deception of our technologically rich society, we were so much emphasis on what you do. We meet people, we say, what do you do? We're doers. Everybody's a doer. With an exaggerated sense of our power. Earth-shaking moments let you know how powerless you are. We spend so much time talking about being empowered. Nothing like an earthquake to let you know you ain't got no power. You don't have no power. You're powerless. It's a hard admission for those of us who are overly impressed with our exaggerated sense of what we're able to affect, because you can walk in a room and bark out instructions because you happen to be in charge with them handful of little people who haven't yet figured out a way of cutting your throat and getting rid of you. And an earth-shaking moment will let you know there are powers at work that don't ask your permission, don't move at your command. And in the midst of an earthquake, anything you try to do is literally a waste of time and an exercise in futility. And the most intelligent thing you can do is just be still and ride it out. Chuck, I remember when I was writing my dissertation in 1996 back in Buffalo, New York, and I was sitting on the front porch. And we had one of them old school houses that had a front porch. You know, before they had ADT, they had neighborhood watch. The neighbors literally watched. They sat on the front porch. And it was a spring day, and I was writing, and I laid out my stuff on the table sitting on the front porch. And then all of a sudden, the wind came along. And you can tell it was old school because I had hard copies. Today, you just look at your digital file. I had hard copies of one of my drafts of the dissertation, and the wind came up. And I didn't have everything tacked down with a paperweight. And the wind came up, and those were my only copies, And I remembered how Jesus stood up in the midst of the tempest, in the midst of the wind and the waves, and he said, "Peace, be still." And he said in other places of scriptures, "Of these things I do, you shall do greater." And so at that time, realizing these were my only copies, I stood up and with authority, I said, "Stop!" You know what happened, Liz? You know what happened? Not a daggone thing. I almost said something else. Not a doggone thing. That wind wasn't thinking about me, telling you. I almost got hit by a car running out in the street trying to grab papers, and it was exercise. If you thank God my secretary had kept another file on a floppy disk. You young people, Google floppy disk when you get home. She had a copy on a floppy disk because I couldn't collect those papers. And my efforts, it was a waste of time. It was a waste of time. There are times in life where you just need to be still. Amen. You can't control everybody in your house. Be still. Pastors have to learn you can't control everything in the church. Be still. Doctor then gave you some bad news. Calling all over town, telling everybody your 9, 10 prayer partners. Sometimes you just need to put the phone down. Be still. Because you're at the mercy of forces more powerful than you. But when the earthquake is over, there is something you can do. It's hard. But the first thing you got to do after an earth-shaking moment is you got to honestly assess the situation. That day, Chuck in my office at Mount Zion, when the ground finally stopped shaking, and we were relatively confident there wouldn't be any aftershocks, we started walking around the church to see what the state of affairs was. Did we need to get out the building? Had it been cracked? Was the roof getting ready to come in? We wasn't trying necessarily to put the books back on the shelf. I just wanted to see where it was safe. Did I need to get out of there? Honestly assessing the damage. Seattle would, after engineers would assess the downtown buildings, they declared it a national disaster area. We qualified for federal funds to help in rebuilding because of the damage done to some of our downtown buildings and infrastructure. Assessing the damage. And it's a hard thing. You've got to be honest, Rodelia. Honest assessment. After this earth-shaking election, what has happened to our political culture? Will candidates have to show their taxes going forward? Will people be able to get caught on tape making the most egregious admissions of sexual assault, things in the past where you would have had a press conference and declared the end of your candidacy, but will they be able to just brush it off and continue to run for the highest office of the land? Will there be any expectations for any type of decent decorum? Is that even a consideration anymore? Will we know where their monies are? And what about nepotism? Since Bobby and John Kennedy, nepotism, we didn't want family and so forth. Is there such thing as conflict of interest anymore? Is anything goes? What, we need to assess the damage. What are the rules? What are the expectations? What can and cannot be said? What is appropriate or inappropriate? What's the damage? Will young men on campuses now throw a tic-tac in their mouth and start grabbing and groping at parties? And when the schools try to chastise them, and they say, well, wait a minute, but the president. How will it trickle down in terms of expectations on campuses and in boardrooms? What has been the damage done? What is the social norm anymore? What is the damage done to? What will be the damage done 4 years from now to the EPA and to the Civil Rights Commission, to the Attorney General's office? What is the damage? And honest to say, and I know if black folks had turned out the way they did in 2012, Hillary would have won anyway, because she only lost by 70,000 votes if you add up Wisconsin and Ohio and Pennsylvania and Michigan. So basically we blew it. But to the degree that some white working people, since everybody's talking about white working people, but they don't ever talk about black working people and Hispanic working people, as if, there's a whole lot of working people. But to the degree that some of them flipped and voted for Donald Trump, why didn't Hillary go to Wisconsin? Why did she pull her campaign out of Michigan a month before the election? Why did she not go back to Pennsylvania? What was the damage done? Some of you may remember the 2001 epic movie Pearl Harbor, starring Ben Affleck. And it's a story about two childhood friends who end up in love with the same woman. But she's a nurse in the movie, and there's a day when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, that day of infamy from the United States perspective, and because they were caught off guard and the medical facilities itself has been devastated by the attack, they're bringing bodies in, as some 3,000 people died and 10,000s of others were wounded. And as they're bringing the bodies in, it befell her responsibility to determine which of those men and women could be saved and which could not. She had to play God. Because they had limited resources, they had limited human resources, limited numbers of doctors, limited numbers of medicine, and they couldn't waste it on situations that had literally no hope from their perspective of saving this person. So in an effort to save all those who could be saved, they had to honestly assess who couldn't be saved, and for them, they would simply give them pain meds and manage their pain. The god-awful responsibility from which in her psyche there'd probably be no absolution, to have that on your shoulders. But she had to do it or they'd lose everybody. And she had to make one mark for those who could be saved, so they would go and attend to them, and make another mark on the forehead of those who couldn't be saved. And the patients, as they came in, they didn't know what those marks meant. Only the doctors did. And there was one individual in particular. He was 17 years of age. He went into the service because his daddy and his granddaddy went into the service, and his guts were literally blown out, and he was in shock, and he grabbed her by his arm with his bloody hands, and he says, "I'm not going to die, am I? You're not going to let me die, are?" She said, "No, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Okay, doc. Okay, doc." And she put a mark on his head for those who aren't going to make it. She lied to him so that his final moments wouldn't be in fear and desperation. But she had to honestly make that hard call. That's hard. That's hard. After all this time and resource, can we really make this employee work, or do they, it's just not a good fit? That's hard. They got a family, they got kids, but that's hard. It's hard. And I gotta make some hard calls. I mean, sometimes in our personal lives, I make some hard calls. Kelly and Destiny's Child, she said, I thought maybe if we started praying, then we would get better. But the more I pray, the answer always comes back to me being done. But we are so hard-headed when we're in love. So I told myself that I should make some changes. But the more I change, there's one thing that remains the same. Can't seem to shake it. It seems you really got a hold on me. But every time that we break up, we turn around and make up. I can't go on now. I gotta move on now. It's not the fact that I don't love you no more, but I gotta break this bad habit. Can't take this bad habit no more. Thank you for my backup singers. That's hard. That's hard. Somebody say that's hard. That's hard. Sometimes situations in your life, somebody need to move, and that's hard. Boy, I remember long before the Thrill in Manila, the Rumble in the Jungle. Long before Linda Rousey got knocked out the last year, and then this year, Ronda Rousey. Oh, way back somewhere, I'd say 1980-something, there was the Thriller on 1242 South Ferry Street. My sister Felicia graduated high school, hadn't decided what she was going to do next, and she had never been in a fight in her life, but her mouth is a weapon of mass destruction. And she got on Mama's last nerve, and Mama's sitting there now, you know, she seems like an elder church mother. No. She was, pound for pound, she was the heavyweight champion of the world. Oh, she could go toe to toe. Oh, don't you let, Claudette had her favorite hymn was Don't Push Me, 'cause I'm close to the edge. And Felicia pushed that day. She wouldn't stop. She wouldn't stop. And then all of a sudden it was pow. And then it just kept going. It just caught. And I was sitting there like Rodney King. Can't we all just get along? And it was bad. It was sad. Felicia took it worse than Ronda Rousey. It was no contest. It was not a technical knockout. It wasn't nothing technical about it. It was a knockout. It was one of them, I brought you in this world, I take you. I called my grandmother. I said, Big Mommy, that's what we called her, Big Mommy. I said, Big Mommy, they at it again. And then my grandmother came over, and I remember her saying, you know, sometimes two grown women can't stay in the same house. And Felicia moved out with Elaine, Nat, because, you know, that's hard. Somebody had to make, Felicia moved out, started staying with Elaine because, you know, it was a hard one. Sometimes you got to honestly assess the situation. Felicia got to go. And some of y'all, them fights, them hell, it ain't gonna stop. Somebody gotta go. Sometimes you just outgrow situations. Abraham and Lot had to separate. You go there and I go there. Sometimes somebody just got to go. Look at your neighbor and say, no, I don't want to get in the middle of that. Sometimes earth-shaking moments are about, sometimes you just gotta make a hard call. After that hard call, that honest assessment, in earth-shaking moments, you got to have some imagination. Did you catch that? The front row, did you catch that, Marla?
I did.
What'd I just say?
You just said you got to have a hard moment.
And you got to have some what?
Hard moments.
And then what you got to have?
Earth-shaking imagination.
Imagination. I know you got on your New Year's dress. I just want to make sure you were paying attention. Some imagination. Imagination. When Chris and Sam was coming along, every morning we watch Barney, 10 o'clock in Buffalo. Just imagine all the things that we can be. Imagine all the places we can go and see. Imagination's fun for you and me. How many of y'all grew up? Your kids grew up on Barney. You remember that song? Oh, that's good stuff there. You put some bass to it, it kicks. Imagination. You say, well, what imagination got to do with anything? Imagination has everything to do with faith, people. Because when you're going through earth-shaking moments, and the ground is shaking, and the walls are buckling, and things are being displaced, while you have to make some hard assessments and honest, hard calls, You don't survive earth-shaking moments unless in the midst of that debris, when everything is disheveled and displaced and in ruins, if you got to be able to imagine yourself in a better place. And one of the most impactful courses I ever took with James H. Evans in my first year, second year seminary was Imagination and Revelation. That imagination has everything to do with faith. Why? The Bible says faith is the evidence of things unseen, substance of things hoped for. We don't believe in what we can see. We don't hope for what we can see. We hope for it. And faith, what is hope? Hope is something that we want to get to. Faith is the ability to keep hoping, keep hope alive. Because life and circumstances, earth-shaking moments will cause you to lose hope. But you hope in what you first imagine. You imagine it and then you hope it will happen, and faith allows you to hold on to your hope. Have to be able to make slaves, have to be able to imagine themselves free. Boy, I remember when I was a kid growing up in Tacoma, Washington, sitting there watching Monty Hall and Let's Make a Deal. Anybody who say yes to that, you know you like me, you over 50 in reality. I don't know what you've been telling people, but if you know, Weeb Eubank in the Newlywed Game. Remember the Newlywed Game? And all them shows ended with them giving out grand prizes. Monty Hall is behind door number 1, door number 2, door number 3. Sometimes it was a new car. Sometimes in the Newlywed Game, the couple that won, and on the dating game, the couple that won, they'd say, you're about to take a beautiful trip to beautiful San Juan, Puerto Rico, beautiful Cancun, Mexico, the beautiful Palm Beach, Florida. And I remember sitting there, me, Norman the Flish, sitting there looking at the TV, and I said, I'm going to them places one day. Flish always running off the mouth. You ain't going nowhere. Yes, I am. I'm going, you ain't got no money. I ain't got no money, but I'm going to get me some. You ain't doing nothing. Listen, we were at 1242 South Ferry Street, 1 block away from Sprague, which was the border to Hilltop. But though I was there, in my mind, I imagined myself being someplace other than 1242 South Ferry Street. It ain't where you are in life. It's where you imagine yourself going to be one day. I may be here now, but I determined in my mind I wasn't going to stay there. When I showed up in Rochester, New York in 1980, and I walked into 1984, I walked in the office of Robert Michael Franklin. I said, I want to travel the world, and I want somebody else to pay for it. 9 months later, I was in Cuba with the Black Theology Project, giving a paper in an international forum through interpreters on the value of black theology to a seminary education in the United States, to black and non-black students, talking to people from 75 different nations in a symposium on the connection between faith and freedom at 24 years of age. Because I imagined myself going someplace. You got to be able to imagine it, because if you can imagine it, then you can hope for it. And if you hope for it, you can stay on your knees and God increase your faith so you can keep on hoping, even though the ground starts shaking and the breakers start dashing and the lightning starts flashing. You can hold on to your hope and keep hope alive. What you imagine, somebody here don't have no education, can you see yourself walking across that stage? Somebody who don't have a job, can you imagine yourself gainfully employed? Not a job you hate, but a career you love. Somebody who's not in a relationship, can you see yourself in a relationship, in a healthy relationship? Somebody who's been in an abusive relationship, can you be in a relationship, see yourself in a relationship where there's accountability and boundaries and respect? Somebody who has been hooked on this and hooked on that and hooked, can you see yourself clean and sober, in your right mind, able to walk into a place and say no thank you, even though everybody else in the room is tore up from the floor up, but you ain't got nothing coursing through you except the love of Jesus and the power of the Holy Spirit? Can you imagine yourself getting up, going to work, coming home? Can you, as you've gone from man to man or woman to woman, always got to be by somebody, so people simply played darts with your heart? Can you see yourself living alone and being okay with that? In earth-shaking moments, you got to have some Imagine all the places you can go and see. Imagine all the things that we can be. Just imagine.
Just imagine. If you can imagine it, then you can hope for it. If you can hope for it, faith can keep you in the game. Continue to hope for it until the Lord works. On that earth-shaking day, it looked so bad. Oh, it looked so bad. It looked so bad when he hung his head in the locks of his shoulders, when he cried out the last time and he gave up his spirit and said, it is finished. It looked so bad, Adrian, when the sun refused to shine. Oh, yes, it did. It looked bad when the moon started running with blood. It looked so bad. It looked bad when the graves gave up their dead. It looked bad when the earth started shaking and the ground started quaking. It looked bad when they took his lifeless body and they took him down from the cross and laid it in Josephus' tomb. It looked bad when the Romans sealed the tomb and put soldiers there to stop a break-in. But as powerful as the forces were that shook the ground that day, those same forces, those same unseen hand of God were able to cause not a break-in but a breakout. Because come Sunday morning, the stone was removed and the grave was empty, because he had all power in heaven and earth in his hands. And you've got to realize today, it doesn't matter whose blood is running. When you're going through crucifixion, you've got to imagine your resurrection. Let me say that again. When you're going through the earth-shaking moments of a crucifixion, you got to trust God for a resurrection. Let me say it again, because y'all ain't shouting yet. I said, when you're going through the blood and the sweat and the tears and the pain and the panic of a gut-wrenching crucifixion, you got to know that you know that you know there is power that will birth your resurrection. I ain't always gonna be here. I ain't always gonna be in this mess. I ain't always gonna be in this pain. I ain't always gonna be in this situation. God, the man may kill you, but God can raise you up again. People may bury you, but God can roll away the stone. Life may kill you, but God can bring you out the grave. You may die, but you can live again. Somebody say yeah. Say yeah. Say yeah. The ground may be shaken, and it may be an earth-shaking moment. Oh, and I may be in the midst of life's restless sea, but I'm all right, because I got an anchor, and my anchor holds because it grips the solid rock. I've seen the lightning flash. I've heard the thunder roll. I felt sin's breakers dashing, trying to conquer my soul, but I heard the voice of Jesus. Bid me still, fight on. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me, never to leave me, never alone, never alone, never alone, never alone. Hey, 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 say yeah, say yeah, say yeah. Doors of church are open.